Hello, Wang Automotive here, and today I'd like to talk about forgotten nameplates. Now, I already did a video on GM cars, and there will probably be a sequel coming up soon, but today I'd like to focus on Ford. Now, Ford is a very old car company, being well over 100 years old, but actually no, it's closer to 120, I believe. But anyway, so it's made a whole lot of pretty famous cars. Say the Mustang, Bronco, F-Series, Falcon, you could probably name a dozen off the top of your head. However, some of these models they made got lost to time. And even if they did sell very well, just nobody remembers them. Now, the first one I'd like to talk about is the Ford Elite. Now, this nameplate was used from 74 to 76. In 75 and 76, it was its own standalone model. However, 74, it was just Gran Torino Elite. Now, it was basically a very fancy Torino, and it was eventually replaced by the LTD2 when Ford began downsizing the land yachts. Now, here's a picture. Which of these is the Ford Elite? Well, half of these aren't even Fords. The Elite looked pretty much like every other 70s American car ever made. It really offered nothing over the Thunderbird, Cougar, or even its Torino sibling. Now, with this model, you could get just every other Ford V8 engine from the 70s. Your choice of 351, 400, or 460 cubic inch model V8s, with the only transmission option being a 3-speed slush box automatic, sending the emission-strained V8 power all to the rear wheels. Now, these sold fairly well, with final production just a hair under 150,000 units. They even made an Elite 2, following Ford's obsession with the number 2. Actually, I should do a video about Ford's sequel cars. That is coming then. Anyway, next one on the list is probably the best forgotten car, the Ford EXP and its sibling, the Mercury LN7. Now, this car was pretty experimental, hence the name EXP, and to be perfectly honest, it should have stayed experimental for a tad bit longer. What came out was a very half-baked, sorry excuse of a sports car with barely 80 horsepower. Anyway, now this was meant to compete with the Honda CRX, which was pretty basic formula, chassis of a basic economy car, but a sportier body and a spicier motor. Well, Ford took the Escort, which was a well-selling compact car, and gave it a new two-door coupe that looked sporty. But it was really, really heavy, with a very underpowered motor out of the base model Escort, which was basically about 70, 80 horsepower, and which made it egregiously slow. Now, it was also very, very spongy suspension, which had a considerable amount of body roll, probably because of the glass rear hatch, which was very, very heavy. Now, the EXP did end up becoming a very well-selling model, with over 120,000 units combined across both model ranges. Now, they were rightfully killed off before the introduction of Ford's next forgettable front-wheel drive sports car, the Probe, which I will be doing a separate video on because it's actually quite an interesting story. Now, one thing to note is the EXP and the LN7, the front ends of these cars could be switched out with just your average Escort front end. It was the same, everything underneath was the same. You could just take the body panels off. Some body shops actually did this, and it actually ended up becoming the second generation EXP, which had the normal front end, and it looks so much better. Next on this list is the Ford Freestyle. Bet you forgot this one, unless your mom owns one. Now, first popped up in 2005, the Freestyle rides on the D3 platform, which is shared with the Ford 500 sedan as its counterpart, as well as the last generation Taurus, the Freestyle's replacement, the Flex, and the Ford Explorer of, I think it was like 2013 to 2019. Now, the Freestyle is from the weird era of 2000s Ford, where every car had the name start with an F, and every SUV had to start with an E, which was really weird, but who cares? Thankfully, after sales fell off a cliff, they renamed the cars better. Now, the Freestyle and 500 were changed to Taurus and Taurus X-Wagon in 2008, which was alright. Now, the Freestyle itself was marketed as a modern family wagon. Now, it was typically powered by the 3-liter Duratec V6, which is a very good motor. Now, you can get optional all-wheel drive. However, with all-wheel drive, you can only get a really crappy CVT transmission. If you got front-wheel drive, you can enjoy yourself a 6-speed automatic. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with the Ford Freestyle. It's just a very generic Ford car from 2005 that just got lost to time and memory. Now, I would like to talk about the 50s. From the 50s, you'd think of cars like, say, big GM cars like the 57 Chevrolet or 59 Cadillacs or 59 Impala. And really, the only car you'd remember from the 50s that was made by Ford is the trucks. Now, the 57 Ford range is actually very decent looking and much more utilitarian and less flashy than whatever GM was working with. It had a range of 1 inline-6 and 2 V8 motors, with the top V8 being a 312 cubic inch police interceptor plant, making 245 horsepower. Now these cars face some structural problems with a lot of rusting, particularly in the roof, and they're much less desirable and valuable compared to a 57 Chevy Bel Air. Now, I've got nothing particularly against the 57 Ford range. In fact, my grandmother had a black 57 Ford two-door, and my great-grandfather had a 58 white Ford, I think it was a convertible actually, I think it was a Sunliner. It was a I think they're very beautiful cars. They are just beautiful, but they are much overshadowed by whatever GM and Chrysler were making in 57, 58, and 59. Now, the next car would have to be, another 50s Ford, the Ford Crestline lineup, the 52 Ford lineup. Wikipedia does 1950s Ford very weirdly, as Ford did the whole thing pretty weirdly. They do it off the body style changes, so they put it under 49 Ford, 52 Ford, 57 Ford. It's very weird, but who cares? So basically, any early 50s car is pretty well lost to time, and nobody saves the 52 to 54 Ford series of cars, available in all sorts of trim levels. Now, the predecessor to this lineup is the 49 Ford, and after this came the Fairline, which lasted to 1970. Now, the Crestline looks like a generic 53 car, barely distinguishable from anything else. However, it was available with the legendary flathead V8, but most were equipped with inline-6s, as the flathead was only available on top-of-the-line cars. Now, you can get the main line and custom line were at the bottom of the stack, but the Crestline was the top-of-the-line car. Now, trim levels, you can get, wagon and convertible versions, as well as pretty recognizable nameplates came out of these years, like the Victoria, the Sunline, and Country Squire. Now, moving ahead in time, the Ford Tempo. I didn't even remember this thing myself. So after the production of the equally forgettable Ford Fairmont ended, everyone at the Blue Oval came together to make the Tempo, another forgettable blob of steel that was crapped out of factories in the hundreds of thousands. Now, it was sold from 84 to 94, and it was slotted just above the tiny Festiva and just below the large Taurus. Like many middle children around the world, it was there, but it was never accounted for. It looks like a car, drives like a car, and that's about everything about it. And if you have a Mercury Topaz, which is the luxury quote-unquote version of this, you drive an even more forgettable car. Who even has a Mercury these days? I mean, I thought they were all putting demo derbies by now. Except Grand Marquis. Grand Marquis are very nice cars. And that and Cougars. I like Mercury Cougars. Next up would have to be the Ford Courier. No longer. Now, the Ford Courier is not the Ranger, Danger, Stranger, Granger. It's what became before it. Now, to be fair, the Courier is a rebadged Mazda B series. But the Mazda B series was later rebadged Ranger, so it all comes full circle. Which means the Ford Courier is a very competitive and very little pickup. which is actually, it was pretty good, and it was sold in 2 generations, the first being like a little mini dent side, being sold from 72 to 76, and the second generation being a bit more unique in design, from 77 to 85. For reference, the Ranger appeared in 83, so it was a little in-house rivalry for 2 years. Now, the Courier is a basic little Japanese pickup. It's, what you think of, like a Toyota pickup or a Datsun hard body. 4-cylinder, manual, rear-wheel drive, freakishly tough, but bite-sized. They sold well, with its main competition being the Chevy LUV, which itself is an Isuzu. So it had decent sales, but never really lived up to the F-Series. And the Ranger, well, it replaced it. Now, it's not the first time Courier was a Ford name. It was actually a kind of a sedan van delivery model in the 50s, which was forgotten because everything Ford made in the 50s was forgotten. Oh, and it was also a Fiesta-based Ute in the 2000s. Oh, I wish we had it. The great things we miss out on in the United States. But I think, there's a lot more forgotten nameplates, and they're lost to time, but I'm afraid I must end today's video here. I'd like to thank you for watching, and, well, maybe you should like, comment, subscribe, do whatever makes the algorithm happy so I can keep creating glorious, glorious car content, and maybe support a very small, tiny YouTube creator. Anyway, I will see you eventually when I make another sequel to this Forgotten Cars series. Goodbye. This is Wang Automotive, and wait, I have an outro. Hopefully you subscribe for more, because this has been Wang Automotive, and I will see you in the next video.